Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Dynasty Junkies, episode 129 of the Dynasty Junkies tonight, brought to you by the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, or the DAP Network, if you will. And I tend to thank you very much for everybody tuning in tonight or listening on your podcast device. If you still have a Zune, welcome to the 20th century. It's an amazing device. Hopefully you use it for a long time. But we've got a great show tonight. We're talking about the NFC South. With me in the B chair, though, first time in a long time, our friend, our favorite, Scott Sidlow. How are you, Scott?
What's up, man? It's a great night to talk football. It's always great to get to talk football again when you might be unsure that you ever will. So
that's right. We won't get into it, but we're glad you're with us and glad you're here to talk football with us tonight. And we've got a heck of a guest tonight. One of my favorites, one of my old school friends in this industry, the one and only Dave Heilman. How are you, Dave?
Doing fantastic. Just got off doing some rookie profiles and looking forward to talking some football with you boys.
Yeah, and I know you're a lot of different places. You're doing a lot of different things. Before we get too deep into this, I want to make sure we give you a chance to announce kind of where you are, where people can find you, and what you're doing these days.
Yeah, so I work for Sports Gambling Podcast Network now, so I am their lead Dynasty analyst. So you can find all my written work on there. We do podcasts. And you can check out my TikToks at Dynasty Dorks. Pretty much it.
That's all you need. Just a couple of dorks talking about Dynasty. You're in the right place. This is exactly where you belong, Dave. We're happy to have you. All right. So before we get into the NFC South, which I do think is going to be a little entertaining to talk about, we got to start with the divisional round. Hell of a weekend for some sports here. We had I would say two good games and two not as good games, maybe is a way to put this. But we'll start off with Mahomes wins on one leg is what I put down in the sheet. What a weird game, but also entirely expected in a way, right? Like this is kind of what everybody thought was going to happen. Nobody predicted the injury, and there was obviously some question marks if he was going to come back in the game in the second half, and then he did, and he played the whole second half. And Mahomes obviously is a machine and a robot and some sort of built on high thing. There were a couple things that frustrated me about the game. Obviously, the Chris Collinsworth stuff, I've had enough of it. Like every single thing that Mahomes does was amazing. Like there was a time where he, pretty much drops a pass, but it's technically a pass. And Chris Collinsworth is like, what an amazing play. That was a genius play on Mahomes' part. What a smart move. And then Trevor Lawrence throws an absolute dot to Christian Kirk, and Kirk drops it. And Collinsworth is like, man, I can't believe Lawrence overthrew him on that one. Like, it hit him in the breadbasket 60 yards down the field, my friend. Like, what more do you want him to do? So I had to get that off my chest. But that was a hell of a game. Scott, what did you think about that? Was Mahomes unbeatable in that game, or was he just playing through?
Dude, he's just one of a kind, man. Like, nobody could do what he does. It's just incredible. Some of those throws he couldn't even step into, and he's like throwing off one leg, throwing sidearmed. He's just throwing it's wild, man. It's so much fun to watch.
Yeah.
Feel bad for him because I feel like this is like the third time in the last like 4 playoffs that he's gotten hurt or been banged up coming into the playoffs. So kind of unfortunate. But we'll see. It's incredible how some of these guys, it's like, oh yeah, well, I don't know, we'll see it. And he's like, oh, I'm gone. We're gone. Let's go. Right. Get me back in the game. I'll be there next week. We're playing. Like, it's just, you could tell like he's young and feisty, maybe when he gets a little older and has family and all that stuff, that might change. But at least for now, he's got that big contract anyway. He's going to go all in and do what he can. But yeah, we've got a good showdown coming up, this weekend. I think it was inevitable. Chiefs are going to go. The Jaguars had a great run. And good for them. Like that was fun. It was fun to see that happen for a franchise.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mahomes, we've got the matchups we should have, I think, for once,
I would agree. Especially, NFC, obviously, you got the 1 and 2 seed. So it's kind of the ones that, deserve to be there. And Bengals, Bills, obviously, with that Monday night game and the what ifs from that. It makes sense that the Bengals made it. I'm with you. There really isn't like a Cinderella.
Essentially.
There really isn't like a Cinderella team this year. You might be able to say the Niners are the closest thing to it with Brock Purdy. I don't know if I disagree with that, but all the teams here deserve to be here, which is kind of nice. Yeah. I think that means these games are going to be great. Dave, what do you think though about Mahomes? Is he still the best quarterback of all time in your opinion? Is it not even a discussion? Is there someone else you'd rather have than him on your team? What do you think?
Best quarterback of all time is that's a tough conversation. He's up there.
He's up there. Yeah.
He's really good. And, I mean, the Jaguars were a fun run. We'll talk about my Giants here in a little bit. I mean, some of those teams, it was fun to see them be more competitive and turn it around this year. But, to expect the Jaguars to go to the Super Bowl was probably a stretch. And it gives us a really good matchup this weekend. I just, we'll see what happens with Mahomes in that leg. I mean, injuries are tough. You can get re-injured. The Bengals, of course, aren't going to do anything dirty, but they are going to go after him. And I thought Jaguars not going after him was part of their downfall.
Agreed.
If you have Mahomes back there, sitting duck, more blitzes, more attacking. And I feel like the Bengals are probably going to do that this weekend. And it could result in him getting re-injured, whether he steps wrong, gets hit, those kind of things. A lot of quarterbacks, they don't necessarily get hurt on the design runs. They get hurt whenever they get unexpected hits and things like that.
Well, and I'll use that as a perfect segue to the second game, of course, was Bills-Bengals in the AFC side. And the Bengals definitely went aggressive after Josh Allen. Mike Hilton rushing off the side a couple different times, blitzing, things like that. They were showing different disguise things. I wouldn't be shocked at all. I agree with you, Dave. I wouldn't be shocked at all if the defense for the Bengals kind of comes out hot here. I've said it to other people. I've been engaged in Twitter threads on this. I think the Bengals defense is where we're going to see the most fireworks from this Bengals team. And it's a lot because of what we saw last week. I mean, the offense was cooking, don't get me wrong, but the defense shutting down Josh Allen for what I think was 3 straight 3-and-outs to open the game. I mean, the Bills got 8 yards in the first quarter. That's ridiculous. They scored 10 points in the whole game. That's ridiculous. This Bills team is not designed for that. And they were at home. They were 6-point favorites. The defense for the Bengals, I'll say our defense, because I'm obviously a Bengals fan if you're watching live. But they are clearly the better defense of the better unit, I guess. A lot of talk was had about the offensive line, but I mean, it didn't seem like the Bengals had an offensive line problem at all. I guess, Scott, any takeaways from that Bills-Bengals game other than it being an oddly weird blowout upset?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm doing great so far in my playoff bets, and that was the easiest money I ever made. That Bengals, it was plus 4.5 when I made the bet.
It was 5.5 when I took it. Yep.
To be in a snow game against a team that just doesn't run the ball, it's mind-blowing to me that their offensive coordinator is a guy who had success and won a national championship playing with like 4 NFL running backs in his backfield, and yet they don't run the ball. Like, I don't understand that. I don't know. Like, I don't know what they're doing sometimes. Like, you can't just keep putting it all on Josh Allen. And there were a couple of times where he's just kind of like throwing it up, but it's because he's got to make a play because there's nothing else happening there.
Well, and at one point they were down 14-0.
You gotta go all he wants, but he's getting triple covered. So, what's he supposed to do? So I think we're gonna maybe finally see now after a couple years of kind of this same story. Maybe they're going to actually get a running back and try to have a little bit of a running game. So I'd be curious to see that. There's a lot of running backs coming in this rookie class. So that's definitely going to be a storyline I'll be watching, and we'll see what happens there. But I think that'll be really interesting. I don't think James Cook I think he's a great complementary piece. He's a great second back option, but I'd like to see them get some sort of bigger back or every down back to kind of take that workload. So I think Singletary is a free agent, and I don't expect him to be back. And I think that'll be a fun thing to watch for, and probably we'll end up overdrafting whatever rookie goes there. So as a community, I'm sure that we will.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, Dave, any thoughts on that Bengals-Bills game? Anything you saw that we haven't brought up here?
Well, I just think it's so hard for teams to repeat performances. That window closes so fast. Not only do you lose players to free agency, you have to pay your good players, but you lose good coaches. And I think if they have Brian Dable over there, it's a different ball game. Ken Dorsey is not the same. Not saying he's a bad play caller, but you're talking about being an elite play caller. and it was his first year. And so to do as well as they did, but yeah, that offense struggle. They had more balance last year than this year, and just that conversation you saw about with Brandon Beane, and I know that's some controversial stuff with some of the things he said, but at the end of the day, you could have drafted one, Justin Jefferson, with the pick you traded for Stephon Diggs, could have had that rookie, contract. But I think the Bills are going to be in the market for a receiver this offseason, most likely in the draft.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's a lot of good receivers in the first couple of rounds that they can probably still get with their pick. And I think that they have a couple different holes, but I agree receivers probably their biggest one. I also agree with Scott that they need a running game. And I don't think you find a running back in free agency that's not going to do what they need to do. So I wouldn't be shocked if their first two picks are first two of the three maybe or some combination running back, receiver, lineman kind of a thing. I wouldn't be shocked to see that this year from Buffalo. Let's move over to the NFC. Obviously, the Giants, Dave. I'll kick it to you first. What happened here? I mean, Giants just sort of fell asleep at the wheel, and the Eagles dominated. I was shocked at that. I predicted Giants to play better after their Minnesota win. I'm like, maybe this team is legit. I think that they got things figured out. Speaking of Dable, he obviously got in Daniel Jones. He figured out the trick here. And then it was not the case. I mean, as a Giants fan, what would you say happened? Was there any one thing or was it a few things?
No, I mean, some teams are just good matchups for each other. And so the Eagles defensive line dominated. They don't have the same. It wasn't the same matchup against Indy and Minnesota. And the Giants had, lost a bunch of games before those two games. Like you, I thought they would play better. I didn't expect them to get blown out, or definitely was not hoping for that. But
Right.
you look at a team that, if you look at you're playing Madden, one's a 90, one's a 75. I mean, it was just an overmatched team, and Philly's a great roster.
No, and I think that's actually a lot of it. And maybe Scott, maybe that's the bigger question here: is this Philly being really good, or was this New York being really bad? What did you see in the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's partly a divisional thing. Typically, when you're 3 games in one season, you generally get one of those as a blowout. So it was bound to happen. Philly really needed that bye week to get healthy. Some teams, they lose their momentum, but some teams it works out. They need to get healthy, and just having that extra time getting healthy, they were ready, they were prepared. And I mean, as much as it's weird to say, Sirianni did a good job, so that's unfortunate, but they played well. And the Giants really overachieved, and I'd be thrilled as a Giants fan. They're definitely heading in the right direction. Now they got a couple things they need to figure out, but Dable's really Dable's legit, man. Like you've got a coach now. So now it's
Finally.
we got to figure out a couple of things, but I think they overachieved, and I don't think there's anything to be disappointed or upset about with this season.
I completely agree. And I think there are a lot of Giants fans that back in August we're looking at this like, well, Dable better be good. And, if we don't win a lot of games, it's going to be, another crap year. And I think if I would have told you in August that you guys would have won a playoff game, you'd be ecstatic with that. That's a terrific outcome for where you guys were. And I think the biggest thing too is that the Giants don't really have a receiving core, right? They got Kenny Galladay, or the ghost of Kenny Galladay, Darius Slayton. They got the off the scrap from the Bills, Isaiah Hodgins, right? Yeah, David Sills. Like they had players that were just names that you've seen on the bench in dynasty leagues or even on waivers, and they were making it work. And it wasn't really like they leaned on Barkley to get 200 yards a game. I mean, it was Daniel Jones finding the players, and I respect fully that offense and how they played, I think, up to their biggest potential. But you put it perfectly. They're a 75 against a 90. They just, and it was a divisional game. That's always a little extra layer, as the Bengals saw with the Ravens. You never know what's going to happen in those games. But I do think that a lot of it too, though, as much as we talked about the Giants, Philly is for real. And I think Philly this year especially is kind of hitting their stride. That A.J. Brown trade probably could not have gone better for them. I mean, that was the exact right thing that team needed. I mean, if you look at it, obviously you can't compare apples to apples, but they traded the pick that became Treylon Burks, who was hurt a lot of the year. If they had taken Burks, would they be here? Hard to say. I kind of doubt it. I think A.J. Brown really changed that team. So, again, I think the Eagles are for real. We're going to see them play this week against the winner of the other game in the NFC from this past divisional week was the Niners, who I mean, yeah, they beat the Cowboys. It's almost like the Cowboys lost the game rather than the Niners won it. In my mind, it was a really ugly game, not one that is, I would say, one I want to rewatch. I'm not looking to rewatch that game. I saw a few different plays, obviously, and highlights here and there. Yeah, Brock Purdy and the Niners pulled it out, but that game felt like a divisional game. It just felt like one of those, it could go any way. There's weird trick plays, there's weird catches and then not catches, and then like just all over the map. So, Scott, I'll kick it to you first. Anything about that Niners Cowboys game you want to bring up, or was it just kind of, all right, on to next week?
I think well, the Niners, I mean, it's just wild what they're doing. Like their defense has just been insane. And the fact that they're just plug in any quarterback and go, it's like, well, we knew you could do that with running backs, but now quarterbacks do. Like, and Purdy didn't even have necessarily a great game, but he made the throws when he needed to. And it's really interesting. He's quite polarizing right now.
Very much so.
With the trades that I've seen go down for him are wild. I've got 9 shares, so I might be looking
time to cash
sell
out.
a few, get some profit on
Exactly,
that. So
exactly.
if you're in a league with me, throw me an offer. But yeah, I'll be curious to see what they do with that whole scenario. I think it's a really fun story for him and all that. But Dallas, that defense, I think like the average football fan that watched, is like, oh, I'll watch the playoffs, whatever, right? And they don't really follow it like we're, like us junkies do. I don't think people realize how legit that defense is.
Oh yeah.
And and I mean everybody's gonna shit on Dak, and like I get it, he deserves it. He didn't play the best game, whatever, but he didn't really get any help from anyone either.
No.
I don't know what happened to Gallup. Like I expected him to start slow coming off the injury and everything, but he never did. He never came around.
He never
didn't
showed
do
up.
anything.
Yeah.
He didn't help at all. Schultz did not play a good game.
Pollard got hurt.
Pollard
right? That's
getting
a big
hurt
one.
obviously changes that offense because he's the playmaker. He's the explosive guy. So, and that line just isn't what it was. So you can put it on Dak. That's fine. But I think that might be a good opportunity. Whereas like the Gabe Davis thing last year, like his value goes through the roof after that wild, playoffs. This might be an opportunity that we're looking at some of those guys to buy, like a Dak might be a buy right now.
I don't doubt that.
I think that last image, that last game that people have in their minds, that seems to stick. But honestly, Mike McCarthy is the main thing. I mean, he wasted Aaron Rodgers' prime years for so long. I mean, I watched that here in Chicago. I'm just going, wow, I don't understand. They should be winning, Super Bowls, plural. And we know McCarthy's not a good coach, and he's still not a good coach. So nothing's changed there. So
right.
I'm not surprised at all that they lost. I didn't think they would ever really get past that with his coaching. So yeah, I'm not shocked, but the defense is legit, and we'll see if Dan Quinn leaves. Then they
said he's staying.
They
said just this evening he's staying.
We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, fair. Well, I wanted to use this, and you kind of brought it up, and maybe we can use this as a weird sidebar. The Trey Lance versus Brock Purdy discussion. You mentioned having some shares and potentially selling Brock Purdy. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you would sell Purdy for a first. I'm pretty sure that would be a no-brainer in most 2023 drafts. Mm-hmm. Would you sell him for a 25 first?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Would you sell him for like a 23 204, something like the middle of the second in 23? There's a line in there is kind of where I'm going. It's like the early second.
I don't know that I love this class, honestly.
Well, I'm
like,
trying to fall in love with it, but
like
not
that
yet.
I like, but it's like, whatever. Like I don't know. It's
there's a lot of landing dependent things for me.
It's gonna really, I don't know. Maybe it's gonna depend on what I had. Do I already have 4 quarterbacks, and he would never be a starter. Maybe if I can fill a spot or use that as liquidity. But yeah, I mean, well, and Lance too, I would say.
Well, and
Like
that's what I
I
was
just
going to
got
go
an
next.
offer for Lance.
Yeah,
And,
what are you giving Lance up for? Like, are you
so,
selling Lance for the same thing, or is he still more expensive in your mind,
well,
or more, worth more?
I think anything you just said, like any first, I did trade a Lance share for Barkley right before the season. So that
That would
worked
still
out
be good. I'd be
short
fine with
term,
that.
but who knows? I'm trying to, I want to see what offer I got here, but it was like Derek Carr plus, some pieces. And I mean, I think you could make an argument Derek Carr might even be more valuable, but I don't like Derek Carr, so
That's fair.
I don't know what
wanna,
to do with that, but
I want to kick it to Dave too. I mean, obviously, Dave, give us some of your thoughts here. I mean, in most situations, as of today, when we're talking at the end of January in 2023, Lance is still worth more than Purdy in Dynasty. I think in a lot of places, you're still going to see that valuation. I think a lot of people are still holding true to that. But are you buying Purdy? Are you selling Purdy? Are you buying Lance? What are you kind of doing with these two quarterbacks? Where do you see this happening?
Yeah, I mean, if you have Purdy, there is an opportunity to sell. I when I saw I had a share, I'm like, hey, what do you, and immediately got a crap offer, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to get rid for that.
Right.
It was like a mid third, a fourth, and like Adam Thielen, and so I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But if you can get a first for Purdy and he does become the starter, you're okay. Like he is Jimmy Garoppolo. He's going to be 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, no, not really any rushing. You're not selling Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow.
no ceiling.
If
or Tom Brady, Mr. Irrelevant, right?
Yeah. And so if you were to sell for that price, like it's okay, but you don't just sell him just to sell him. There is a world where he's a starter next year. There is a world where Trey Lance comes in as a starter, and then we haven't seen anything from Trey Lance yet. He could have a short leash. If this guy that's took him to the championship game and lost one game, or took him to the Super Bowl and lost in the Super Bowl is behind you, like Lance is going to have a short leash.
Yeah.
And so that could be that's time. Maybe that's time to go buy Purdy if Lance gets announced as starter or something like that. But I'm in a startup right now, and I saw Lance go ahead of Purdy. I wanted nothing to do with it. I was like, I am not investing.
Where did he go? Do you know? Do you remember?
QB 14.
Okay.
And that was with that was actually with 9 draft picks off the board. So probably 2 quarterbacks, we'll say. Okay. So QB 15, 16 range for Lance. Purdy went around QB 21, 23.
Interesting.
And so, but Purdy still went. And, I'm looking, I got pick 112 on the board or Brock Purdy. And I'm like, I'm going to take
for me.
And I was going to take 112 regardless. Purdy went. So it made my decision so much easier. But I was like,
well, that's where his value is then. Yeah.
But that's, it was back to back. I took 112. Purdy went 1 pick ahead of it.
Well, and I want to make sure I mention this too. I just wrote an article for Fantasy Pros, came out today, and the January DLF ADP in 1 QB anyway has Lance at 13 and Purdy at 18. So there is definitely a swell for Purdy right now. And I think obviously that's without any of the rookies and rookie picks and all that. So, I mean, 13 is probably a little high because I do think some of those other guys are going to be ahead of that. But if Lance is valued at 13, I'm out. I'm selling. Like, give me that all day. And then if Purdy's at 18, I'm out. I'm selling. Give me that value all day. Like you put it perfectly, Dave, even in a perfect world where one of them starts next year, I'm not sure either one of them is QB 18 in fantasy point scoring. And in Dynasty, like as much as I want to hold on to quarterbacks for forever, I mean, Trey Lance is a prime case of why you don't do that. There's a whole bunch of times where it doesn't work out, right? And there are times where it does, Justin Fields and others where so it's just as volatile as every other position. But if I can get out of that to someone that's I'm more secure with or feel like has a higher floor or, Lance and a piece to tear up, I'm all for that. You know what I mean? Like Lance in a second for like maybe not a Dak, but maybe like Lance in a second for Kyler Murray or something. We'll get into that actually with our Find Me a Trade because
here's like the stock analysis. There is no cost to acquire Brock Purdy when you acquired him.
Right.
So no matter what, you're going to make some type of profit if you get out. So it's kind of a win-win scenario. You just want to win as much as possible. With Lance, you have to hold him if you have him because the cost
you do and you don't. The sunk cost
fallacy,
though, right? Back. Like that cost is gone now. That cost you've invested it, it's over. And I think I agree with you to a point. There is something about like waiting until the most maximum potential profit. And I'm not sure now is that time. I agree with you on kind of that point, but I want to make sure that I'm clear at least. I don't necessarily say hold for forever. If you paid, the 103 for him, you don't need to wait for the 103. It's been a year. That cost is gone, and
no, for sure. It's hard to sell a player when they're hurt.
Oh, for sure.
You're not going to get like a 20%. You're going to give away like instead of a 20% discount, you're giving away a 50% discount.
Yep. And like I said, we'll mention that with the Find Me a Trade with Recovering Ridley Truther, who was in the chat tonight. So hopefully he sticks around. Thanks for hanging in here, Corey. But we'll get into that later. But anything else you guys want to talk about in the divisional matchup? I know, Dave, I didn't really give you a ton there, but I know you had a lot with the 49ers anyway. But anything else to bring up? All right.
We're good.
With that, I think we're going to move into our next segment of the night, the main chunk, the main meat of the show. We're going to talk about the NFC South. Now, obviously, the NFC South was not in the divisional round. They did not advance that far. The Bucks got beat by the Cowboys. They didn't make it to the divisional playoffs, but we're still here to talk about them. We're going to bring up some buys, sells, and holds, try to talk about each team a little bit and give you guys some advice if you got some of these players. Dynasty doesn't stop. And I know for me, and I know for you guys too, a lot of leagues that I'm in are either not rolled over, but it's open for trading. And this is the time to start making some of those moves. This is the time to kind of feel your gut and say, all right, what do I think is going to happen? Where do I think the values are going to go? If you feel like a player is at the max value, now might be the time to get out. Like I said, if you feel like this is the bottom, that they're only going to get better, or that someone's leaving, something's changing. That's why we do this exercise. And we're going to be going through every division over the next 8 weeks. Well, this is week 2. We're going to start with the Bucks because they finished at the top of the division. Some of the best or top fantasy players, I'll just briefly mention so everybody kind of pays attention here. But we've got Tom Brady, Leonard Fournette, Rachaad White, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Julio Jones, Kate Otten, Cameron Brate. There's some names on the Bucks for fantasy. Scott, I'll throw it to you first. Any of these players a buy for you? Anybody you like to add to your roster right now as we head into the next season?
Really the only buy. So the hard part is obviously with these teams, they're probably trending in, up or down, right? So a lot of them are going to be, we're going to sell or we're going to buy. But I would say in this case for me, I'm going to go, if I had to pick a name, I would say Chris Godwin.
Okay.
He would be the one buy for me. I think he'll fit in any system and he'll work with any quarterback. He's still, age-wise and injury-wise and everything, he's in perfect spot right now. So regardless of quarterback or system or whatever happens there, Godwin would be the one guy in that offense that I would be very comfortable rostering.
That's a great point. And obviously we don't know what's happening with that offense. There's going to be a lot of changes. It looks like they changed every coach except the head coach there. And they're most likely getting rid of all the different people that were involved with Brady. Maybe Brady's on his way out too. There is obviously some rumor mill and talk and all this. Does he retire? Does he finally go back to the Patriots? Does he go to an AFC team? Like there's so many different questions there. So I like that Chris Godwin call. Dave, what about you? Anybody on this team that, I don't know, screams like a buy in a general sense for you?
Screams is probably
talks at above normal volume.
Yeah. A guy that intrigues me is Rachaad White.
Yeah.
Especially when people have rookie fever, you could probably get Rachaad White for an early second or a mid second. This is a guy that, he could easily take that backfield next year. They have Leonard Fournette is a cut candidate. We got to see what happens with Brady. Brady's salary, they hope that he either retires or they can trade him, because if not, like they're gonna have a $35 million $35 million cap hit, and so they got to figure something out with him, because the way that contract is a $35 million dead cap, and so Fournette's going to be out. I think Rachaad White, takes over that backfield, or at least takes the lead of that backfield. And we saw some promise from him last year. I know that, Brady kind of took over the offense at the end of the season and Fournette got back in there. But with a new quarterback, with a new offensive coordinator, Rachaad White's interesting.
I agree with you. Actually, Rachaad White was my buy too. I just feel like he's still relatively cheap. He's probably about what you would have paid for him to begin with as a draft pick. And I think a lot of people are not, they didn't see enough to really raise his value, but I saw enough. I think that the future is bright for Rachaad White, and I think that there's a lot of potential there. I'll pivot quickly into my sell, which is Mike Evans, just because I think that the age cliff is coming. I think that he's had a ton of great years. I think it's 7 straight years with over 1,000 yards. I mean, that's amazing, but that can't happen forever. And I think if Brady leaves, which I'm, 60-40 at this point that Brady leaves, if Brady leaves, the new QB coming in is probably not likely to focus on Evans as much. And I do think Godwin's the up and comer. I think Evans becomes like a Julio Jones type as we see from here on out. So I'd be fine to buy Rachaad White and sell Mike Evans. And in a weird way, I think you could maybe even pull off the kind of trade where if you have Evans, you might be able to send Evans for Rachaad White in a second or something like that. And I might be down with that. I might look for something like that just to kind of get both done on the same trade. But Scott, what about you? Who would be a sell candidate, if anyone, on this team?
So for me, it's Rachaad White.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, I'm typically selling running backs this time of year, so that's just part of my philosophy. Yeah. So, okay, that makes sense. I don't think, well, in fact, I know you really can't get anything for Evans at this point. So,
well, and that's why I'm saying
you just want to say like, okay, just
yeah.
get him off my roster, and getting the roster spot is enough. Plus, whatever I get back, fine. If you're a rebuilding or retooling team, you may just have to do that. But as any sort of contender or even close, I'm just his production will outweigh whatever you get for him in a trade. You just can't get anything. So I'm not going to sell him. But Rachaad White, I mean, I think he's someone I didn't like as much as most other people as a rookie. So I guess that could be my bias playing into it as well. I just think that offense might be in for a bit of a struggle, at least next season. I mean, obviously we don't know what's happening there yet, so it's hard to really say. And I also feel like, because of the fact that, I mean, I literally think I wasn't just saying some crazy number. Like, I literally think there are 20 running backs in this class that could come in and have some sort of role, within the first year or two in the league. I mean, I
some
really
of them even with day 3 draft capital. I agree with you.
Like, and if you're, and I mean, there's 32 teams in the league, so there's 2/3 of the league is probably going to take a running back at some point. And I just think that's going to eat into a lot of what these guys do. And I don't know what's going to happen with Fournette, but I would guess he's just going to be gone. So
I can't imagine they keep him or re-sign him or anything like that.
Yeah.
Dave, who's your sell candidate? Anyone on this team that you want to get rid of?
I mean, kind of the same boat. Like, Mike Evans may have opened up a window to sell at the end of the season, but he was so bad this year. His ADP currently is 99.6. It's not good. He's getting in the fever range. It's just not a good situation.
I like that fever range.
I'll say Chris Godwin only on the fact of you can get something for him.
Yeah.
Chris Godwin, just like Scott said, I'm not afraid of, even if Blaine Gabbert's at quarterback, he's still going to give you some production. They could bring in somebody. We could see Jimmy Garoppolo. We could see Derek Carr. We could see maybe they get a Hendon Hooker at the end of the draft. We could see them do something with the quarterback. But I'm doing that startup. So just give you some examples. Chris Godwin, the guy after him was Jameson Williams. If you could take Jameson Williams or Chris Godwin. Like I mentioned earlier, you're looking at the potential 112 or Chris Godwin, Christian Kirk, Brandon Ayuk, Marquise Brown, George Kittle. The 111.
So I would pay the 112 for Chris Godwin. Yep. In any league, in any format.
And then you got Dobbins, Judy, Goff in a super flex, Terry McLaurin. Like, that's the range.
Okay.
So so I feel like you can still get some decent value for him. And if you're a contender, like, that's like you're sitting at the 111, 112, you want to just get someone that's going to shore up your roster. Boom, it's a good deal for you. And I'm also moving on, and I don't have to worry about who's his quarterback, what's going on with the offense.
Perfect sense.
I can go to get a rookie.
So you're saying you would sell Chris Godwin for the 112?
I would buy him for that.
In that range, I would sell him for Jameson Williams and Brandon Ayuk.
I agree. Yeah, I was going to say the same. I'd rather sell Godwin for a player than a pick at that point. And I think that the only other way I would word this is if you're trying to buy picks, now is the time to do it, right? Yesterday was better than today. Every day those picks go up in value. So if you're trying to buy into the draft, you got to get on that. And I think if for some reason, and this isn't unheard of, if you have Godwin and you're the 111, you didn't quite win, and you're like, maybe my team's just old. I've got a bunch of aging players. Let's say you got there with Brady and Godwin and a couple of other running backs like Leonard Fournette, even like, let's say you're the Bucks and you're just like, man, I don't think I got it. I could see the pivot going to the 112 and, trading that contender that you just lost to and saying, you know what, give me your 112. I'll have 2 in a row. Maybe I can make something happen with that. There's some logic there, but in general, I'd rather have the known asset than the pick that becomes a rookie player, which could bust. I don't think Godwin busts. I think his floor is really solid. I would much rather have Jameson Williams for that matter. If I can sell Godwin for Jameson, I'm happy to do that. I think that guy's future is still bright. Even if that team keeps Goff, which he played well this year, I don't know why they wouldn't. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of options there, and selling Godwin's not a bad move at all. Let's get to the hold, and honestly, Godwin's my hold, right? That partially because, like what Scott said, I think that team is just whatever they do, Godwin's going to be fine, and I think his value probably goes up after the draft. So I'm holding for now. I'm not holding forever. There's no one that's a hold forever. I'm just thinking that Godwin probably has the most variation and fluctuation on values between now and the beginning of the next point scoring season. So if I have Godwin, I'm holding. And again, I don't have Godwin, I think, on any teams. I think the only team I have him on was with Rocky on Junkies 1, and we traded him for Debo pretty much right before the playoffs. And I mean, that trade panned out because of points, but that's still a tricky one anyway. Like that, did we want Debo or Godwin? I mean, I would still say Debo, but I could see the logic in saying Godwin, and there was another pick that kind of helped buoy that Godwin side. But regardless, Godwin's my hold for all the reasons you guys mentioned. But again, I don't think there's anybody in my mind. There's nobody else I really want to hold unless maybe Rachaad White, but his value is so low. And I feel like you can still get him for a steal. But Dave, I'll kick it back to you first. Who is your hold on this team?
I'll go with Tom Brady.
There you go.
And it's I mean, if you could sell him for something right now, like go ahead and do it. I think right now people are like, maybe I'll give you a contingency trade. Like you can have my 2nd round pick if he plays this year, if he's still on the roster by March. But like, you're not going to get like serious offers right now. And he's the guy that like, I don't see any of these guys getting a serious increase in their value between now and September, except for Brady. He's the only one that could get an increase because if he comes back, if he gets traded, if something happens to confirm, his value is going to go from a late 3rd round pick to a 2nd round pick. And obviously in your super flex, maybe even a little higher.
That's a fair point. Scott, what about you? Is Brady your hold too, or do you have another name on that list?
Absolutely not. I mean, essentially, we kind of already covered it because I would just say Evans is my hold because I don't think you can
Same
get
logic
for him in a trade. So if I'm a contender now, if you take, let's say you take over an orphan and your team's just young and you just want to get the points off, then sometimes it's better to just get anything you can and clear up that roster spot. So.
Jason brings it up in the chat. So Fournette has 0 value. I noticed none of us mentioned Fournette on any of our lists. So unfortunately, Jason, I'm not sure. Fournette was my other consideration for hold for the same logic. You're not going to get anything for him. I think there's a lot of players in this team that you just can't get much for right now just because of the age and the variation and the unknown future. I think if you have Fournette, he's probably a hold of the 3 options. I guess I'm holding. I'm not going to sell Fournette right now. There's no reason. I'm sure as hell not buying any Fournette right now. Unfortunately, sorry, Jason. It looks like he's going down the list there.
Fournette has it would be 5 million dead cap, 3.5 million in savings. But if he's a post June 1 designation, 3.5 million dead cap, 5 million cap savings. So there's a pretty good chance that
there's a good out there.
Cut. But the year after, however, it's 1.5 dead money and 7 in cap savings, 7 million cap savings. So that's like almost a guarantee at that point. So maybe he's there one more year, but he's probably gone. And the only way he stays, I think, is if like an OC comes in, Brady comes back, they try to run it back one more time, fix the O-line, whatever. But
it's kind of,
and if that happens, sell.
Right. Well, that's actually what I was just going to say. Like, that's why you're holding Fournette for now, because you're not getting anything. Right. But any spark of news, get out. Yeah. I mean, if someone sends you a 24-second for Fournette, smash accept, right? Like, let's just move on. Speaking of moving on, let's go to technically the next best team in the division, which was the Carolina Panthers without CMC. This team looks like some of my dynasty teams where it's like one player and that's about it. They got Sam Darnold, Matt Corral, Deonta Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, DJ Moore. Anyone else we want to mention? LaVisca, I think, is technically on that team right now. I mean,
Terrace Marshall.
Terrace Marshall, the third, I think it is, their junior. That's one of those teams, again, just looking at it from a fantasy standpoint, it's like, yeah, you need to rebuild, brother. Like, you got nothing there. I'll go first with my buy, which is Sam Darnold. It's been Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold's one of those guys that kind of got abandoned by a lot of dynasty managers. I think he still has a shot to earn that starting role, and I think any starting quarterback has value. And I think right now there is a chance that you can get you can get Darnold for next to nothing, depending on what's going on. The team did just sign Frank Reich as their head coach, so there's some logic there of like maybe now's the news and now might be not the time to buy because everybody's like, oh, he does well with quarterbacks. We don't really know that. But yeah, I mean, Sam Darnold's my buy only because I've been buying him already, and it's kind of like an easy answer. But Scott, I'll kick it to you first on this one. Any of these Panthers players you're looking to add to your roster before we get too deep?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious one is DJ Moore. I think his value is just so depressed at this point. I traded Pat Freiermuth for him in a few weeks ago. I guess maybe more like closer to the trade deadline. And that's a non-tight end premium league. So pretty much any non-elite tight end, I'm always willing to trade in a non-tight end premium league. And sure. I mean, I felt like that seems that just seems low for DJ Moore and like what he's capable of. And obviously they locked him in with that contract. And now that we know Frank Reich's there, even better. Most likely they'll get the most out of whatever quarterback they end up with, just based on his track record. So even like Carson Wentz, everybody was, shitting on him, but like he had a decent fantasy season anyway in Indy there. So I was like, okay, fine. I don't care if he sucks for the Colts. What do I care? I just want the fantasy stats.
Right.
So,
put the points. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say based on that, I mean, I think DJ Moore is kind of the obvious, but you're right. It just depends on if he gets a spike right now based on that news.
Yeah. What about you, Dave? Anyone on this team you're trying to buy at the moment?
To be honest, nobody. But DJ Moore would be the obvious. Sam Darnold, he may not even be on the Panthers next year. The only quarterback under contract for them is Matt Corral. Not buying Matt Corral. I'm not going to tell people to go do that. But Darnold is.
I was earlier, but now.
Darnold is interesting because of the price, and he did play pretty well. But again, they're having all the changes with the coaching staff. So if anybody, DJ Moore, and that's just because he's a talented player. He's going to get a ton of targets, and the price is right now. You're getting him in the late wide receiver 2 range, and he gives you mid wide receiver 2 numbers every year with bad quarterback play. So even if Matt Corral or Sam Darnold's his quarterback next year, you're going to get. Yeah,
no, that's a fair point. And for sells, I mean, I think it's obvious the sells are the running backs, right? Like Scott said it before, we're rarely buying running backs this time of year. And if anybody out there feels like for whatever reason Deonta Foreman is the answer in Carolina, have him. I'm happy to sell you those running backs at this point. I mean, Chuba Hubbard, even like you give me a third, I'll take it. You know what I'm saying? Like I'll do whatever you want to get me out of this. I think there was one league where I remember getting an offer for a 24 third for Chuba Hubbard, and I hit accept, and then the guy sent me a message. He's like, I meant to send a 24 fourth. Would you want to do the trade for the fourth? And I'm like, I'm not trading. No, I'm not. It's a third in a year. Like, no, I'll take the third. I'm not taking the fourth. Like, I don't want to be penny pinching, but like, I'll take a third, but a fourth. What the hell's the point? You know what I mean? Like at that point, it could be 412. Like, I'm not doing that. But a 312, sure. You know what I mean? Like, at least it's something. So as weird as that sounds, I was happy to make that trade. But yeah, I think that's kind of the obvious choice for me. Scott, are you on the same page? I'm guessing you are.
I literally wrote down all running backs.
Yes. Whatever the running backs, sell them all. Yeah. Get rid of them. Yeah. No further analysis needed. Anything from you, Dave, on who would you sell on this team?
I mean, if anyone's interested in Matt Corral, if
There you
he's
go.
on the block, I would
Yeah.
trade him if I had him. And this is the time where we don't know who their quarterback is. He's the only one on the roster. You can try to sell that to somebody, and even if I'm going from 312 to 303, and I'm giving you Matt Corral, and I'm moving up the board, I'm fine with it. Like, I just, but some people liked him. I mean, check if you're in leagues with analysts, check their rankings from last year. Whoever had Matt Corral in their top 2, go offer him.
That's not a bad move at all. Yeah. And then obviously the hold, I'll go to you first, Scott, on the hold. Who is this? Is there anyone on this team you're holding?
So I just said all quarterbacks because
There you go.
I agree that Corral could, absolutely be a sell. And if you can get something for him, great. But if not, let's just see what happens and who ends up there. Corral's the only one under contract. You're right. So, but basically anyone that they sign, if they were to sign like a Baker or, whoever they end up signing, just if you have them rostered, I'm probably going to hold on to them because I think they may get a little bit of a value bump based on just signing there, but I think Frank Reich will get the best out of them, and they have at least some weapons there that more likely than not, their value will go up at some point in season. And then I'd be willing to sell or, see what actually happens with the team because their defense is pretty decent. Mm-hmm. So I think they're going to spend on the offense in free agency and in the draft. So, we could see quite a bit different offense there next year. Like I think Frank Reich will have like a Doug Peterson effect on that team. Now they're not going to have the success because they don't have Trevor Lawrence, but I do think he'll come in and kind of stabilize things, and we'll see them be kind of what they were at the end of last season. Wilkes, I think, did a great job there. They were competitive, they were in games, they were winning games. So I would expect that to continue. I wouldn't expect them to be like in contention for the 101, next year. You know what I mean? I don't think they'll be a total trash, especially in that division.
Oh, I was just going to say the same, actually. In this division, it's literally up in the air. To me, all 4 of these teams could win it next year. My hold would only be DJ Moore is the only option for a hold, only because, like you kind of said it, I think his value goes up with the more news that we get. I think his value has the most chance to go up, which is why he would be a buy also. I totally get the logic there. But if you have DJ Moore, there's no reason to sell him now. Like, you're probably selling him low, might as well hold. And I do think that he's the one player on this team that is a fantasy game changer. He's someone that, of all these players, the only one that I'm likely to start every week. And so that makes him a hold for me just to kind of see what happens. But I don't blame you at all if you want to try to sell him on that either, or buy him on that even, I guess, in a sense. But I just think that he's got the most upside left in the tank. So I'll hold that. Next on the list, we've got the New Orleans Saints. What a weird, polarizing team, because in the NFL, it feels like they're not great. But for fantasy, gosh, they've got some good names here. But we've got Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston, Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed, Jarvis Landry, Adam Troutman, Juwan Johnson showed up out of nowhere. Lots of names here. Lots of names we've heard of. Dave, I'll throw it to you first. Who would be your buy out of this massive group of players for this team?
Oof. It's tough.
Is there anyone?
I mean, I like Shaheed. I don't think he's someone that I'm going to be starting, but like, he's someone that, I would be like interested in doing like a throw-in on a trade, something like that. I just, Chris Olave, the people are too sharp to be able to sell him. So I think the price is getting too high for Chris Olave. He's of course someone I would check in. People get rookie fever. And if I could give you a we'll say a mid to late first for Chris Olave, and you're going to accept that because you're so excited about the draft, you can have fun on draft day because I'm going to have Chris Olave on my team. So
I was actually going to say the same thing. That my buy was Chris Olave, depending on the price, like with an asterisk. There's really nobody else in this team that I want right now. I mean, I think Kamara still has some left in the tank, but he's got some off the field potential suspension, all this. We'll get into some of that. But Chris Olave is the one guy on this team who's rocket boosting up, who's already rocket boosted up. Like, he's already up there. So if you can find the right person, then that would be my buy. I'm with you. And I think other than that, I don't know if any of these guys are a buy. I mean, maybe Adam Troutman, if you think that he's going anywhere, maybe Taysom Hill if you think he sticks around. But yeah, the only one that even stuck out to me as a buy was Chris Olave. I completely agree with that. Scott, anything on your end, I guess, or whether it's Chris Olave or someone else?
Yeah, so for the Saints, I wrote down as my buy, Chris Olave, as my sell, Chris Olave, and as my hold, Chris Olave.
I was actually going to try to do the same sort of thing. I feel like this team is almost one-dimensional in that regard. I maybe we can use this to pivot. Is there any value in Michael Thomas? I'm just being honest. Like, is there any value? Do you want Michael Thomas on your roster? The answer is no.
I didn't want him 3 years ago. Can't stand the guy.
No,
no interest.
No, there's no value. I mean, I guess would be the hold because you're only going to get, and he might be someone that goes somewhere else. But I'm just, I was okay. I was okay with the price last year and was, drafting him a little bit. But now I'm just, nah.
He was got burned like the rest of us in one of my leagues.
Yeah, I think he's my wide receiver 3 in Scott Fish. I don't have him a lot in Dynasty, but I thought, oh well, you can get Michael Thomas 12th round, 11th round. I'm okay with that.
Risk it. Yeah, you got to play it different. Yeah,
with that. Rashid Shaheed was better.
Scott, what was the trade that you were talking about?
Okay, so Michael Thomas, it was an early third for Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, and a mid 4th. So basically moved up around to get rid of Landry and Thomas. Basically just clearing roster spots for his
rookies. So that that feels very much like a team that has 10 open roster spots and is like, I'll trade back around to add 2 players that could be worth something. Yeah, I've got a couple of those teams.
Yep.
That, just are scraping the waiver wire barrel every week and just seeing what you can get. I don't mind that.
If that's not a throw-in, I don't know what is,
So. Well, and that obviously pins on Jarvis Landry too. I mean, is there any value in him? The answer is probably not much either, right? Unfortunately.
Nah, the guy. Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Now, are we going to sells?
Yeah. Any sells here? Anyone you want to sell, Dave?
Yeah, if you can get anything for those tight ends. Juwan Johnson had some decent games last year. He looked good. He had some, tight end 1 performances. And if anybody's interested in Taysom Hill, those guys, I don't think you're going to get a whole lot for them. But like those guys are, tight ends are hard to find. Find someone that doesn't have a tight end on their team and say Juwan Johnson's young if you want him.
Well, I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head there. Taysom Hill is one of those guys that he was, tight end 3, if I'm looking at this correctly, in a lot of leagues. And if you're one of those, and I have a couple of these I play with, if you're one of those people that looks at end of year rankings and sees the 3 there, you're like, hell, I'll go get Taysom Hill, right? And you're like, hey, he's tight end 3, go get him. You know who else was in the top 10 though? It was Juwan Johnson at tight end 8. Same logic. Like, this is non-PPR scoring. Your scoring may vary, but the same point still stands. He was in the top 10 in almost every format. And so if you're looking at this, like, you don't have a tight end, let me help you out here. I'll give you the tight end 8 on the year. Find some threads on Twitter, find some articles that pump up Juwan Johnson and go get a second. You know what I mean? Like there might be someone out there willing to do that gladly. So I'm with you. The tight ends are the sells to me here. Only because I feel like, and not necessarily Adam Troutman, I feel like he really disappointed, but it's really because the other 2 did everything else. But yeah, if you can get anything for Taysom Hill and Juwan Johnson, that's exactly where my brain goes. What about you, Scott? Other than Chris Olave, of course.
He was, So Juwan Johnson, for example, was very touchdown dependent. And that's another team. We just don't know what's going to be happening with that offense too. Who's going to be the quarterback? And there's just so many questions. I mean, I don't know. So I would say sell everyone. Don't worry about holding anybody. I mean, maybe the hold would end up being Kamara just because you can't get anything. He'll probably have that suspension add in next year. So sell anyone you can and probably hold Kamara if you're a contender because you're not going to get anything for him. So
that's actually exactly what I was going to say was Kamara is the only one I would hold. And then I was even going to add a drop category for Michael Thomas and Juice, Jarvis Landry. I feel like some of these guys are not even worth the roster spot anymore. And I think Michael Thomas is a prime case of someone who I want someone else to deal with that headache. Right. And if you drop him and someone else picks him up and he blows up, you still did the right thing. You know what I mean? Like it's just one of those weird situations. for Alvin Kamara, let's talk about that for a hot second here. I think Alvin Kamara is one of those guys that has a ton of value in the right system. It just hasn't been the right system for the last 2 years. I don't know if it'll ever get back to the right system. He's an aging running back with tread on the tires and off the field issues. If you can still sell him on name value, go for it. I have him in a couple of leagues, and I can tell you that the offers I'm getting for him are terrible because everybody's on the same page. Everybody who's paying attention knows it might be over. He might be the Todd Gurley of this season that goes from something to nothing in 1 year, right? Or the Lev Bell, one of those like just drops off the cliff. So yeah, if you can get anything for Kamara, go for it. But I mean, I don't mind holding him either on the same kind of logic of just being like, well, if he's only worth a third, I might as well just hold on and watch the ride because what's a third worth anyway? Like maybe there's a chance he gets traded or they get hell. Let's say they get Aaron Rodgers and Sean Payton comes back, which both of those things are unlikely. But if some crazy thing happens, Alvin Kamara might be worth something on the news and sell him on the news. That's the obvious choice here. So yeah, Chris Olave across the board. That's our answer. I love that, Scott. Well put. Anything else you guys want to talk about the Saints? I think we've said enough.
I'll just say one more thing on Kamara. Again, for the hold reason, there are people out there that do think that it was a system thing, not a Kamara thing. I know when I put stuff on Reddit, I got a bunch of people out there. I don't think he's done all kind of, but I don't think he gets suspended for a long time. He did not. It was not a situation where he was, this wasn't a woman. This was a man. I know they got a video. Right. But I don't think this is going to be a 6-game suspension. I think it's going to be 2 games, a smaller game. So you hold this, and he gets a 2-game suspension, and he could get traded. I think there's been a lot of rumors about him getting traded. I think he does. And if he gets traded, there's your opportunity to sell 2-game suspension. The suspension comes out, trade comes out right after, then you could sell.
I agree. Yeah. And with that, I think that says a lot. Let's go to the Falcons, the last of the 4 teams in the NFC South for this breakdown tonight. Top fantasy options here. We had Mariota, Ritter, quarterbacks, I guess, Desmond Ritter, Marcus Mariota. We have Tyler Algier, Cordero Patterson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. Another one of those teams kind of in a way like the Bucs where it's like a lot of fun names for fantasy, but just I don't know if there's a lot of value on the field here in a way. I'll start, I guess, with mine on this one. My buy would be Kyle Pitts. Again, if you can get the right price. I think a lot of people that have Pitts have held Pitts and are not going to sell him for less. And they're willing to ride this out. They didn't sell him 6 weeks ago. They're not going to sell him now. But you might be able to find the right person who's just fed up with it and doesn't think the Falcons are going anywhere. I think your only buy window for him could be right now. I do think he's a talented receiving asset on this team. I think he's very talented as a player in the NFL and all that. I think he'll get his looks. If you can get the right price, it's Pitts, but I don't blame you for not. I wouldn't say buy high. I'm not saying, go sell the farm and give up everything for Pitts, but I think this might be your only dip in the next 12 to 18 months because the further we get from that injury, the more people realize and remember not only how good Pitts is and how he was in his rookie year, but how dried up the tight end landscape is. It's Kelsey and everyone else now. And I think that there used to be a couple different tiers in there, depending on how you worded it. But honestly, I feel like it's Kelsey, maybe 8 tight ends that you're okay starting, and the rest of it's just a crapshoot. So if you can get Pitts at a fair price or low discount price, I'm all for it. But I don't know. I feel like that was the easiest option, I guess, in my book. But there is not an easy buy here. I guess, Dave, what do you think? Is there a buy you like on this team?
Drake London, depending on the cost. I mean, he's fallen behind some of these other guys who finished a year stronger. I do think he's a very talented player. I'm just looking at the board of, this current draft of where he went. And honestly, in this draft, it's a bad example because he went very high in this draft and he went ahead of Chris Olave. He went ahead of, I just don't think that happens in your draft. I think he's probably more in the 20 to 24 range, and you can get him maybe even cheaper than that. I think that they are a very good candidate to bring in somebody like an Aaron Rodgers, but I have Derek Carr going to the Atlanta Falcons. They have a ton of cap space, the third most in the league. They got some young weapons. I don't think they fully believe in Desmond Ritter, and they tried to trade for Deshaun Watson last year. And this is a very poor division. Derek Carr can get out of the AFC away from Mahomes and Herbert and everybody. He could go to the NFC and win 8 games and win the division.
It'd be pretty crazy, and it's definitely possible. Yeah. What about you, Scott? Are you on the same page here?
Yeah, I think Atlanta's going to be a popular team for landing spots for all these quarterbacks, whether free agents, trades, or even rookies. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. But Drake London is who I put down. I mean, Drake London's my guy. So, I think he definitely showed he's a competent receiver. Mariota's terrible. So the fact that he did anything, and then he did a little better there with Ritter. So that was nice to see. I think, Pitt's value's still pretty up there, although I have seen some trades for him. So yeah, it would be Drake London for me. I don't want to get into pretty much anywhere else. And London's really the only guy that we know for sure it's like signed on that roster as a wide receiver, pretty much everybody else is gone, traded, or is a free agent.
Well, I'll just say this, and the DLF ADP that came out has Pitts at tight end 1, which again is going to make it tough, right? And I'm not saying sell him at tight end 1 or buy him at tight end 1 price. I'm saying if you can get a discount, buy him, because that's the only way I would try. But London is wide receiver 15, and he is at the end of the 4th round. So there are some real truthers out there on London too. So as much as you want to say Pitts' price is pretty high, there are a lot of London truthers that are not going to let him go either.
That seems crazy, actually.
I don't disagree.
And I love London, but that seems crazy.
I'm out.
That's super flex ADP, right? So what I'm saying, and I'm skipping ahead a little, but London was my hold because I feel like that team can only go up, and I think London is the guy that I want on that team at the current price. I do think Pitts is probably the better player and the better asset, but if I have Pitts, I'm clearly holding because I've already held this long. So there's no advice. You don't have to tell someone to hold Pitts. You know what I mean? London, I think there are people that are potentially scared and trying to sell. I'm saying hold. You guys are saying buy. That is the same kind of advice. So again, not to skip too far ahead in the system here, but I wanted to hit that on London. But I guess let's talk about sells then next. Scott, who would be your sell out of this team? Is there anyone you want to sell or get out of at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, any and all running backs.
As always,
I never had any Patterson. I guess unfortunately, for 2 years ago, but Tyler Algier is a guy that I didn't have a ton of shares in my portfolio, but I think I've sold all of them at this point. So I'm selling. I think he's a replaceable guy. I mean, he's solid and he can do everything, and he could very well be the guy next year. But again, just a lot of running backs, a lot of free agents, a lot of rookies, and he's just not a special talent. I don't think that offense is going to be so great that he's going to have so many, scoring opportunities and all that. So I just think he had a nice end of the year. His stock is up a little bit. I think he's a good sell candidate.
Algier's definitely a good sell candidate. What about you, Dave? Who would you sell on this team?
Yeah, I'll start out with Algier as my first, because that's the same thing. I put an article out there about the age cliff running backs, but I also said don't forget about draft capital guys. He's a risk, and last year he did really well when Huntley went down, and so that was a big part of his surge at the end. And Huntley was a good running back, but both those guys could easily be replaced by one of these backs, and I think they're going to get a veteran, in the NFL free agency, but I think in the draft they could bring someone in. It's a low draft capital, even not this year, maybe even 2 years down the road. But Desmond Ritter, if you can get something for him right now, like I said, I do think they are a prime, and they could even draft a quarterback with higher draft capital. But I think that if you can get something for him, you try to go get it now, whether it's using him plus something to move up the draft board or getting some draft capital for him. If they liked him and really believed in him, he would have started sooner. Mariota was playing awful. Number two, they would have drafted him higher. And so this guy they passed him up twice, I think.
Twice. Yeah.
So you're not really invested in him. If you're risking passing him over twice and he didn't play enough or play well enough at the end of the year for them to be like, that's our guy. So again, I think they do get somebody in free agency.
Well, here, so I'll kind of piggyback on both of you. Ritter and Algier are both sells for me as well. I think running backs are always good sells. Both of these quarterbacks, if you can get something from Mariota, go for it. I don't care. But again, to reference DLF ADP, because I thought this was entertaining when I was looking at this, which would you have earlier in a super flex ADP, Ritter or Algier?
Ritter.
Ritter is one spot ADP ahead of Algier. Ritter is 102 at QB 27, ahead of guys like Tannehill and Howell. And then those are the quarterbacks. And then you've got Algier at running back 29, ahead of Brian Robinson and Leonard Fournette, like we just talked about. Like 101 and 102 and 103 in ADP for DLF. Now, granted, it's a 4 mock draft sample, so it's a little bit fluky in a sense. But that still tells you a little bit about where their values are. It's almost they're even in a sense, and players going right around them is Isaiah Pacheco is right ahead of both. I'd rather have Pacheco than both of those guys. Mm-hmm. So I totally agree with that logic. But if they're only one spot away, someone out there might disagree. And if you can send Ritter for Pacheco plus a pick, which I think is possible in some leagues because Pacheco is a running back and people hate running backs. And Ritter's a quarterback, and Superflex, you need quarterback. So you could sell the hell out of that narrative and make some money on that. So I'm looking at this like if you're going to sell these guys, find guys in similar ADP and check the market, check the community as much as you can, do Twitter polls, whatever, tag us on this. But find out what the value is because right now, and again, we're all three of us on this tonight have been in this dynasty game for a while. I personally think the most value fluctuations change in January with the offseason starting and all the speculation. They then change a lot at the draft in April, and so the May ADP is all wonky. And then you see a lot of things change during the season, usually in October is what I find is when you actually see players step up and fall down. But right now, January is a really good time to try to strike on those value changes. And so, again, these are prime examples of that in my mind. If you can sell Ritter for something now, please go for it. I don't have a problem with that at all. I don't know if we want to spend too long on the hold. Is there any holds for you, Scott, on this team? Or is it all kind of do what you can, get what you can, take them, leave them, don't care? What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I put Pitts. Just because I think you could sell if there's an opportunity for you to get a nice return. And we might be talking about that shortly coming up.
Foreshadowing.
So yeah, I mean, it's going to depend. I haven't really. A few of my Pitt shares, I've kind of, looked around in some leagues to see, what I could get, but mostly I'll probably hold. I just don't. He's almost like a young quarterback where he's kind of got value insulation just because of like the hype and the age and the everything that he does. So I don't see a reason to sell him unless it's you're a contender, it's making you better, and it's going to get you maybe over the hump. So, that could be a possible scenario. And I'm probably not buying him because I just don't want to pay that.
Right.
I'd rather just, give me Kelsey for a lot less.
A lot cheaper. Yeah.
Just go
potentially more production for the next 2 years too. Yeah.
Especially Andrews' values down. I'll take Andrews too if I can get a discount on him. So,
well, real quick, this year for tight ends was wonky, wasn't it? Like coming into this year, we had like Darren Waller and George Kittle and TJ Hawkinson, like all these guys, and then they just sort of all got shuffled in. Who the hell knows now? Like Waller's worth nothing now, which we'll get into on the AFC West. But Dave, what about you? Any holds on this team that you want to discuss?
No. I think he covered it. I mean, I think he made a good. Scott made a good point to sell Pitts, and I know that's like blasphemy in Twitter, but. Even coming off a bad year, he still's got a ton of value, and so I don't have any Pitts because he's too expensive. But I would trade him if I had him.
Well, I think this is maybe the other part, and I mentioned this to the point where it's almost my tagline now. But like timing is everything, right? There's no reason to sell Pitts in season. The injury happened; he went on IR. Like but now the season's over. Now is the time to sell him, right? Literally 3 weeks ago, when the season was still kind of happening, and all this. You probably weren't going to get the price you're getting now for Pitts because now people are looking to 2023. Now the past doesn't matter anymore. Pitts is back to tight end 1, as I just said, in tight end ADP and all this. Like now is the time to go sell Pitt or to get the king's ransom for Pitts. And if you didn't have to pay a ton and you just used a draft pick on him, which a lot of people did, you might have been a 103 that year you took Pitts, right? Well, you might be able to get maybe not Bijan, but you might be able to get the 102 for Pitts. And in this year, that could be, Stroud or Young, which could be a better pick. So, I mean, it depends on how you want to play this game and what you think you can get for him. Always, always, always. Timing is everything, but price is king, right? Don't just sell to sell. Don't just buy to buy. All of our advice was based on valuation. It's not saying, go sell Chris Godwin no matter what. Go buy DJ Moore no matter what. That's not it. Go shop. Go find the price. Don't be that guy in your league that doesn't make any moves this offseason and then goes into next season without anything. And you just kind of are stale and stagnant. Go do something. Go figure it out. If you're in a bunch of leagues like the rest of us, and if you're a junkie like us, you probably are in a bunch of leagues, pick one. I do this a lot in the offseason. Pick one and take that whole week and find trades. Send offers, send players, send notes. Like, just focus on that one league. And then the next week, pick a different league and try something else. Go get what you can. I think if you do that all offseason and kind of focus on it one at a time, your teams will significantly get better. Even if it's little stuff, you can make a ton of money at the margins. You can make moves to trade up in rounds and things like that. Like I said before, too, that now is the time to trade for picks, right? Before the better would have been a year ago, right? So every day that goes by is a worse day. So go trade now if you want picks. If you want a rookie pick and it's on the clock, you're going to have to pay out the nose. Nobody wants that. So I think that pretty much sums us up for the NFC South. Appreciate that, guys. That was pretty good. I think that we went through a lot of good info there. But with that, we got to get to our last segment of the night, my favorite segment of the whole show.
Find me a trade. Find me a trade.
I don't know if I played the first time, but we played it the second time. There's our friend Brian Haar. So this one's Find Me a Trade. I'll read some of the instructions here, and then I'll pull up the team if you want to read off the names when we get to that point, Scott. But I'll read through this first. Submitted by former Ridley Truther, who is in the chat tonight. Thanks for showing up, Corey. Appreciate that. The team is Flexual Production, and it's an ultra flex league. So I want to spend a second talking about this. I've only ever seen, I think, one of these for Find Me a Trade. This is a very unique format. It's a 12-team, I guess start 10, but it's 2 super flex and then 8 regular flex. You don't have to start any tight ends. You don't have to start any running backs. You don't have to start any receivers. You technically don't have to start any quarterbacks. It's literally entirely up to you. There's a maximum of 2 quarterbacks and a maximum of 10 every other position, really. It makes for some wild stuff. Let's just put it that way. But the other points of this, it's a 6-point passing touchdown league, -1 for interception, -2 for pick 6. I like that there's a difference there. Half point per first down, various yardage bonuses all across the board. It is tiered PPR, which this was something interesting too. Wide receivers 1.15. Running back 1.25 and tight end full 2.0. That's a pretty hefty premium on the tight end in that book. This is, again, it's a 12-team league with 25 roster spots, plus 5 IR and 4 taxi. Corey's thoughts, he said, we thought with 0 roster requirements, it'd be nonstop trading, but it ended up being a semi-stale league. And this happens sometimes where you're just like, man, it's the right settings and it just doesn't line up. Solid league mates, though. I'm in other leagues with every one of them. My team, I went in thinking I was a contender with a high tight end premium, but ended up middling with no clear direction. Made a trade early on for Kyler, but now he'll be out into 2023 season. Help. Thanks, gents. So with that, I'll bring up his roster real quick here. And before we do that, we got him in the chat, of course. Thank you, Corey. F. Matt for life. That's right. We're going to try to see what we can do to help you out. So give me just a second to pull up his roster.
I've got the roster up.
Go for it. If you want to start reading it. Yep, you want to start reading it. That's perfect.
All right, so quarterback group, he has Dak, the aforementioned Kyler, Ryan Tannehill, running back, a whole mess of them. Nobody really, Devin Singletary, Zonovan Knight, Justin Jackson, Hilliard, Hasty, Evans, Ford, Connor, Warren, Chandler, Chestnut, Malik Davis, Amon-Ra St. Brown, KJ Osborne, and Rondale Moore are the only 3 wide receivers on his roster. And then tight ends is where he's hammered it. So he's got Knox, Higbee, Njoku, Freiermuth, Everett, Johnson, Hill, Gesicki, Alberto, and Kyle Pitts, and Trey McBride. And then no first round picks, but pretty much the entire end of the second round and third round. And then his 24 picks as well.
Yeah, this is I don't know if this is a good team or bad team. That's why I start with this. Like, man, this roster requirements thing is tricky because, like, you don't need running backs. You don't need tight ends. It makes everything a little bit different. Usually I like to say, well, what's my strength? What's my weakness? When I'm finding a trade. So I appreciate you bringing this one to us, Corey. This is a fun one. Dave, why don't we start with you first? I know you had some interesting thoughts that you jotted down on the sheet here. So why don't we kind of kick it to you to start and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, and to touch base on the the ultra flex concept, I think it's interesting, but you also are making it so flexible that like people don't have to make trades, and
Right.
that's like it didn't work out. I always say like add a flex if you want to like make your league more. But adding 8 flex and getting rid of all the, people don't have to have running backs on receivers. So I think that the draft strategies can show you who values certain positions. And so you see that certain teams thought and probably would have done what I did. If I don't have to draft tight end, I'm out. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm taking Kelsey or no one. And so like you have 3 teams combined have 1 tight end. So those teams, I think, obviously, if you can convince them to take a tight end, maybe they're, someone that you could sell to because they don't have anybody. I think those 3 teams combined for Adam Troutman. But they're probably not very interested in tight ends. I would, in this strategy, of course, with Superflex, wanted to, scoop up as many quarterbacks as I could. So I would take those tight ends and I would see what I can get, whether it's draft capital, packaging, and pairing people. I don't care if I end up with 0 tight ends on my entire roster at the end of the offseason. I would rather beef up my receivers and my quarterbacks because that's going to be the strength of your team the rest of the year. Throw out the premium. It's great when Tyler Higbee has 10 catches this week and you got 20 points for it. That's fantastic.
So you
But
probably didn't
next
start
week
him.
when he gets no catches, you're like, what the hell? So, like, you got to get those quarterbacks. They're king and super flex. And Dak and Kyler are like, they're good. But you want to try to get an elite option, but you definitely got to get something more than those other guys.
Well, yeah, and I think with his backups being Tannehill, who might not be playing, and Ellinger and Murray being hurt, I mean, you're going to need somebody there. I agree with your logic. Was there anybody specific, I guess, that you would want to target as a quarterback? I know you mentioned a couple in your thing, like anybody you would want to try to reach out to and kind of get the feelers on.
Yeah, I mean, like Geno Smith ended the year on a little bit of on a sour note. He's someone that you could, possibly go and get. He feels a lot older than he actually is. He's 2 years younger than Russell Wilson. He's 32 years old. I do think the Seahawks, get him. And people are concerned with 2 first-round picks. Do the Seahawks go and draft a quarterback? And I'm not telling you they're not going to because they possibly could. But I do think that drives the price down. They could franchise tag him. They could go and transition tag him. And even if let's say they drafted, quarterback at 18, not in that first pick, the second pick, they could get someone. Maybe they sit behind Geno for a year. I think he's earned himself, and Geno could also go somewhere else. I mean, he's someone that if they decided not to work something out, he could go to Atlanta. He could go to the Jets. Oh, that'd be interesting. He could go to Tampa Bay, New Orleans. But Geno is just kind of a cheaper option that I think you get to be that bridge until Kyler's healthy.
I like that. I think, too, just to kind of tie it in with where we talked earlier, I mean, you might be able to go out and get a Matt Corral on the cheap. You might be able to go out and get an Andy Dalton on the cheap. I don't think that's a bad idea with the way this roster is set up and with the way that, quarterbacks might need something. And here's, again, really truther in the chat. I'll put this on the screen. This ended up being the worst year to hoard tight ends in a high tight end premium league and be a tight end salesman. I completely agree, Corey. You got kind of shafted this year. Like if this was any other year, you would probably on the right strategy here.
If Murray was healthy, I would say package Pitts and Murray and go up and get a big dog. I just don't think you can do it right now with Murray's injury.
Well, yeah. And so, and I'll kind of piggyback on yours to get to my trade real quick. Mine was, and I think we kind of hit on this, the draft capital. I feel like this team is probably, if you're in the middle, then the only way to go is up or down. You don't want to be in the middle. Like the worst place to be is that, 5th through 9th kind of spot. Like if you're going to be bad, be bad. So my thought would be, let's try to look into 2024. Let's see if maybe I can get some more firsts. He has, I think it looks like here, he's got 124 first from what I can gather. and then a second, a third, fourth. Yeah, so he's just got the normal picks for 24. So my trade was going to be to send somebody like a Dawson Knox for a 24 first. Now, the only thing that I'm not sure that trade gets done as it is, it's kind of the skeleton of the trade. You might need to flesh it out with some other pieces. But I think with the seconds you've got, you might be able to do, Dawson Knox in a 23 second for a 24 first and second, something like that, where you trade back a year in a sense and have somebody trade up. I think you might be able to pull off a trade like that in a high tight end premium. You might have somebody who's looking like the Joe to Tiger team is who I was talking about making this trade with, because they don't have any tight ends. And again, from our pre-show talk, Scott was saying he's familiar with this manager, and is Joe to Tiger is a phenomenal dynasty player. I'll just put it that way. And so he knows what he's doing, but he might look at this and still think, man, it'd be nice to have a tight end. And with that 2-point tight end premium, maybe there's some upside there I'm missing out on. And a 24 first, not everybody's excited by those. And again, Joe to Tiger only has 2 picks this year, so he might be one of those players that doesn't like draft picks. I know I'm usually one of those people that tends to send my picks away, and I don't have a lot of them. So as soon as you give me my new picks, I'm trading them for players. You know what I mean? Like, give me my 25 picks MFL. Let's trade those away. So that was kind of my trade, was a Dawson Knox for a 24 first. Scott, what do you think about that? Am I on the right track here or not?
Yeah, I mean, as far as moving a tight end, 100%. I mean, you guys both nailed it. As usual, Dave's right on with his breakdown of everything here. I mean, essentially, what you have to do is we got to go back to basics here. We got to keep it simple. We got to trade from strength, right? And number 2, we got to look at the league format and go, okay, it's flex. So really, we're just going to break this thing down on a points per week, right? Points per game, points per week, and try to put points in our lineup. So sometimes the names aren't the prettiest, and I think this is the perfect scenario in which you could trade Pitts, right? Because you can say, I mean, I have and probably not everybody feels the same, but like I love Freiermuth, I like Knox, and I like Njoku and Gesicki and McBride, and like, so whatever. I mean, pick whatever 2 or 3 guys you like there, and let's try to move the other ones. And I mean, Pitts is a guy that's going to have obviously the most value, so why not turn him into more points in your lineup? And the other thing that Dave said was, let's try to maybe get off Kyler to a different quarterback or just add other quarterbacks. So I'll just jump into mine. So I kind of came up with 2 options. Initially, the first thing I wanted to do was just add a quarterback just to get some depth there and figure out what I have with Kyler, because again, we don't know the offense. We don't know what's going to happen there. So we might want to hang in and see, especially since, didn't he say he just traded for him, right? So
I wanted to bring that up. He did trade after Kyler got hurt. He pretty much sent Lance and some picks for Murray.
Yeah,
and I mean that trade ends up looking pretty solid right now in my book. But
yeah, so I mean
that's
fine. And so Dak, obviously being a buy candidate, isn't really a sell candidate. So maybe we don't know. Maybe Tannehill sticks around another year in Tennessee. Maybe he goes somewhere else for be a bridge or something. But this team, Don Laurent, basically, you could give up. This was interesting. The only reason that I'm going to mention this trade real quick, and then I'll get into my main actual trade, is I put it in the trade calculator and it came up dead even. So I just thought it was funny, and I was like, "Well, this accomplishes 2 things," and it's literally 30. Happens. It's literally dead even. So Kyle Pitts for Mac Jones and Michael Pittman. And it doesn't seem like enough for Kyle Pitts to me. Like, I don't know if I could actually do that trade, to be honest with you. But I just thought it was really interesting that it was dead even in the calculator. But again, that's why calculators are, it's a guide, right? But what that does is it divests you of Pitts, which you don't really need. You add another quarterback, which I think is probably a buy candidate right now for me, with them getting Bill O'Brien. I think that's going to put him back on the right track, and hopefully, get him going to where he should be. And Michael Pittman is also a guy that I really like, even though we don't necessarily know what Indy's offense is going to look like. But he is the guy there. I mean, so I believe in him. And that's just going to put points in your lineup, essentially, right? That's going to, Mac will give you depth. Pittman will probably be a starter. So, a small thing you could do. Now, if you don't feel like that's enough,
real quick on that one, I did want to mention this. You hit on it perfectly. That doesn't feel like enough for Pitts, right?
Yeah, it doesn't.
But
it doesn't.
If you're breaking it down by points and taking names out of it, it's entirely fair. Because I think what you're getting, the Pitts to Mac Jones points per game is, if not equal, Mac Jones has a higher upside because he's a quarterback. And I think that offense is going up.
Right.
And you're adding Michael Pittman, which you're getting kind of for free if you're just talking points. So I think this is exactly in an ultra flex league. I think your analysis is exactly right here. You need to kind of take some names out of it because you don't really have a need at tight end. You don't have a need at receiver. You don't have a need at quarterback. I mean, maybe a quarterback because you still can only start 2, but you have to be kind of more strategic with the points and how you deploy these players because they're pretty equal in that sense. You don't have to start at tight end. You could start 3 1 week and 0 the next. Like that could be seen as a pro or a con. I'll tell you what, this kind of league would frustrate the crap out of me. My brain would go nuts with this. I'd be fidgeting with my lineup all week. You know what I mean? There's no set it and forget it position because they're all flex. But I just wanted to mention that. Like, I agree with you, but at the same time, Mac Jones and Pittman would make this team better. So I actually really like that trade. But yeah, get into your bigger one too. I want to make sure we give a lot of time for this one.
And this is where we're really going to have to throw out names because I have a similar scoring setup in a league. So I use that to base this on. And I'm really going to have to throw out names here because, I mean, you're probably not going to like it. But just you're going to put more points in your lineup. And I want to get off Kyler, honestly. I don't want it really anything to do with him. So I'm kind of trying to like maybe buy players that are their value might be down a little bit right now. So sending away Kyler, Singletary. I just picked Singletary. You can pick any one of those running backs. Again, Kyle Pitts. And then, you could throw in one of your seconds or whatever. I don't know, just to make it happen. Right. For Lamar Jackson, DeAndre Swift, and DK Metcalf. And I mean, you're not getting younger. You're not getting sexier. Like that's, again, it's not really, and you might feel the way I feel about Kyler, maybe you feel about Lamar, right? Like not everybody loves Lamar and, we don't know, is he going to be the guy there, whatever. They're going to have a new OC, there's questions, but I think that's why you can get him, right? Mm-hmm. Because if there wasn't, I don't think you could do this trade.
As soon as he resigns or goes somewhere else, the Lamar's price goes up.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen. He's going to have news that's going to have his price go up. So now is the perfect time to buy Lamar.
This is your window. Agreed. I'm going to be trying to buy a few shares myself. He's still only 26, Now, DeAndre Swift, I know a lot of people are just kind of out on him at this point. Jamal Williams is a free agent. We'll see. I mean, they kind of made him the third down back this year, but he still showed it when he's healthy, man. He can just take anything to the house. Like he's that big play guy. So that gives me kind of like an anchor piece at running back, and then you can mix and match all those other backs you have. Like I love the roster build at running back. Like what you did there is awesome. Yeah. That's what you're supposed to do because those guys, when they play, when they're playing, they're going to get you points, and not when they're not playing, you're not starting them, so you're not hurting yourself. And then DK, just getting yourself a solid receiver that's going to come in, and no matter who that quarterback is, probably Geno for at least another year. DK should continue to be the guy there. Hopefully have a little more touchdown upside in the future, but, a solid piece. And in the scoring, you're going to gain at least 10 points a week. I don't know what the yardage bonuses are, but it should help you significantly because Singletary and Pitts weren't getting you any yardage bonuses.
Well, right? Like whereas Swift could get points you big for like games, 20 yards and it wasn't a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, none of those guys that you're trading away were going to get you really any yardage bonuses. Whereas any one of these guys that you're trading for could be the quarterback one, the running back one, the wide receiver one, any given week. So you're giving yourself that ceiling as well as not just putting the average points in your lineup, but you're getting that ceiling play additionally. So I felt like that was necessary to kind of get that next step towards being a true contender.
Yeah, I thought this was more of like you're trading a similar floor for a higher ceiling, kind of like what you just said. Where you're getting a lot more upside on these players. And this actually, again, this roster, this construction build and all this reminds me a little bit of like a best ball team where you have no control over who's going where. Well, that means you're looking for ceiling. And I think maybe that's the general advice that I would give to you here, Corey, is go get players with the highest possible ceiling. You did a great job at running back. I think Scott put it perfectly. Like, you want players like Mike Davis and Snoop Connor and JaMychal Hasty. You're not going to start them unless somebody's hurt and you know you need to. But when you need to, you're going to love it. They're going to have a great week. But in this league, you don't have to start any running backs. So you're not hurting if you only have those kind of guys. And if you've got a ton of tight ends like this, you can start 6 tight ends one week and then not any the next, like I said. So, Dave, I know it's been a minute since we've heard your voice here. So what would you say about these trades or this basic thesis we're going on here for Corey's team?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing is you need to inventory the league, and you can base that on moves or just conversations with people. I never just throw people on the trade block, because all it does is mean Scott and Andrew are going to throw their people on the trade block. Nothing actually gets accomplished. And it's sell me this pen. The first thing you need to do is you find out if I need a pen. And so I'm going and I'm DMing people and saying, yo, Scott, are you interested in Kyle Pitts? Yo, Andrew, are you interested in Kyler Murray? If he says no, then why am I selling him Kyler
Move
Murray?
on. Yep.
And because even if I sell him Kyler Murray, he's not going to give me this great price. And so you move in silence. You don't do it in the chat. You go and talk to people. And then you find out, okay, well, these 3 teams are selling. Okay, now you do an inventory. I have tight ends. They need tight ends, or they like tight ends. They want this blue pen. Then you go and move it. But it's also a lot of wasted time by just throwing random offers out there. Go and talk to people. Find out who's selling, who's buying. And first thing first, you need to figure out if you're selling or you're buying, and then match the needs.
No, I like that. And here again, Corey back in the chat, recovering Ridley Truther. Thanks, gents. This league was one of those looks good on paper ideas. Midsummer offseason boredom spawned. Good league mates, though. I've joined plenty of those leagues. You're like, well, this sounds fun. And then 2 years later, you're like, not so much. But I do think it's a unique league that I do think we will see more of in the future. I think that there are a lot of players in Dynasty that are looking for something like this. So again, appreciate you bringing it to our attention and letting us know.
It could come back around. Sometimes after the startup, there's not a whole lot, because you just did your startup and you kind of have your team and, whatever. So, we see what happens around the rookie draft and see, so that it could really come alive here this year.
And I know you've seen this.
You need 1 or 2 trades to open the dam.
Yes.
I was just going to say, I know you've seen this, Scott, in all the leagues that you're in, but what you need is maybe one manager leaves and a new one comes in, and the whole league is reinvigorated. I've seen that happen in a few different Dynasty leagues where it's a little stale, it's a little stagnant, it's a little blah. And then one manager comes in and starts blowing everything up. And you see a trade and you're like, holy crap, that's a great price on Pitts. Let me go send him an offer for Kyler Murray. You know what? Just let me go get something. And so you start sending offers, and the whole league is very different in a week. So I don't give up on this league yet, Ridley Truther. I think you've got a good team. I don't think it's bad. I think you just got a couple of holes you can shore up. And again, you put it well. Unfortunately, this was not the year to be tight end heavy. Just brutal luck on that. But yeah, had it gone the other direction, you'd be sitting pretty and be buying drinks at the bar with your winnings. But with that, I think we've done a pretty fair amount of job on the Find Me a Trade this week. Anything else you guys want to bring up or discuss on that one? Or we pretty much wrapped it up? I thought so too. All right, with that, we're going to get out of here. We're a classic 90-minute podcast this week, if not more, which already it is. That's what we do. Scott, you've been gone a minute. I want to make sure I give you a chance to say goodbye. But before we do that, I got to say thank you so much to Dave for coming on the podcast tonight. It's always a pleasure having you on. Why don't you give people where they can find you again, in case it's been so long or it's 3 days later and they've put this on pause for a while while they're done errands.
At Dynasty Dorks on TikTok and Twitter. And then, of course, check me out on Sports Gambling Podcast, SGPN Fantasy Football on YouTube.
Perfect. Yes, thank you for that. I'll mention this too. We put it out there a couple of weeks ago. I haven't said it since, but we are most likely doing a Dynasty Junkies 3. We're not going to put it in tweets. We're not going to mention it. If you listen this long in the podcast, there might still be some openings. I don't want to guarantee anything, but if you want, send us a DM, send me a DM or Scott or one of us. Don't put it on Twitter. Send us a DM, #DJ3. It's all you got to do. #DJ3. That means we know you listened. And then we can put you on the short list. We'll try to see if we can get everybody in and do another startup this offseason if you want to be in that. I am Andrew Hall at Andrew Hall FF. You can find me on Twitter. Scott Sidlow at Scott _Sidlow. Portfolio Dynasty on Twitter. Rocky's not here, so he doesn't get his name read. He'll be editing. Rocky, thanks. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Find us every week. Every Thursday, we go live on the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, at that network on Twitter and YouTube and all of the other places. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. We love seeing people in the chat. I'll let Scott say bye to them. But again, thanks so much for joining us this week. Thanks to Ridley Truther for the Find Me a Trade. Scott, take us out of here, though.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Great submission, great league. That's definitely what we want to do here over the next few months as we kind of trend towards the rookie draft. So let's get some different types of leagues and let's figure out. Let's talk some big overall strategy. That's the good stuff, man. That's what I'm here for. So I love it. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Appreciate you guys. Keep those FMAT submissions coming. Thanks again to Dave. For Andrew Hall, I'm Scott Sidlow. Junkies out.